We're live.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first of the Wroxhill corporate and financial webinars in this lockdown scenario. Anyway, we're very keen to keep the Wroxhill events going, and we are trialing our first of what is, I like to think of as tomorrow's business live. I'm Michael Davis, one of the directors at Wroxhill, and you all know him very well from the tomorrow's business emails every day. Is Simon English, the chief city correspondent of the Evening Standard. Morning, Simon.
Morning, all.
Extraordinary times, and it's easy to trot through the cliches, but I was wondering, Simon, how this compared to other crises that you've experienced in your career.
Well, it's different and it's worse. I think that's obvious, but it really is worse. From the point of view of newspapers, obviously there's an operational challenge, the sort of which we've never experienced before. And when it came to 9/11 and it came to the financial crash of 2008, I mean, there was no issue then with us getting newspapers out or us putting things up on a website. The similarity was that the appetite for news of any sort was heightened. That's something that is in common with this crisis. But it wasn't an operational problem. We went into the office, same as usual. I think on both of those two examples, I was at the Telegraph for the first one, and the Evening Standard for the second. And in both cases, there was a kind of a war room where senior people would gather to discuss how we were going to handle it. On this occasion, there is no war room. It's what you can see behind you. It's people's living rooms. So I think that is the difference here. And the other difference is the same, which is for absolutely everybody, which is the terror attacks may not directly affect you personally, and a financial crash may not directly affect you personally. It probably will, but it may not do. On this occasion, I mean, it's equal for everybody, I guess.
Great. Simon, I'm keen to have a chat about how things have changed at the Standard and how you're coping with it. But before we go any further, firstly, in a great act of supine solidarity, I see you. What's under your hat? Have you had a haircut?
I asked him not to bring this up. Yes, we're all trying to cope with being at home for a long time. I'm going to bring in my daughter here to explain herself. She's trying to escape with that. Yes, I thought it would pass 10 minutes, waste 10 minutes of a Saturday afternoon, and entertain my family if I shave my hair off. And that's how it looks now. I wasn't expecting to be seen in public in any way for some time, but there you go, Michael. As you say,
excellent. You're making me feel an awful lot more comfortable. And can I also just introduce my colleague Olivia from Wroxhill? And Olivia's going to keep an eye on questions coming in from the community. So if people have got any queries, please type them in, and we'll make sure we sew them in either to the conversation we have or the discussion at the end. But Simon, it does create unique challenges for getting a newspaper out every day. How's the Standard now set up to put together the paper every day?
I think the answer is remarkably well in a very short space of time. And to give him this credit, George Osborne moved incredibly quickly on this. We were well ahead of the curve. It was one of those occasions when you can sort of see the advantage of having an ex-government person as the editor. So I think we at the Standard had a sense of how serious this was going to become a lot sooner than I'm guessing most businesses actually. He just knew. And there was a disaster planning list very quickly. And we were all aware that we were probably going to be working from home. We'd done a couple of dummy editions where we were all sent home at midday. So we got the paper out, then it's like everyone home, and we're going to do another paper this afternoon. what we wrote, what we put in didn't matter particularly. It's just kind of, let's see, can we do this remotely? So everyone had a laptop, everyone had certain bits of software, certain bits of kit that meant that we could see the pages, and we just tried it. We experimented a couple of times. So that meant that when it came to the real things, well, we had done it, and I don't think that is true of other papers. I think other papers, it was a bit of a shock to their systems more so than us, because as I say, we tried it. I think that for the Standard, us being slick is always imperative, and in these circumstances, absolutely even more so. It's got to be fast and it's got to go on time, otherwise we won't get it out to anybody. So sorry if I'm rambling, but from a production point of view, the deadlines have always been tight. They are now almost sacrosanct. These pages have got to go. We've got to be done at 11. We go to print, and then a bit like in normal times, vans will drive across town, and we're not doing drops at very many places, but we're doing drops where people can get it. So it should be at your local supermarket if you live in zone 2 or 3. It should be, and then those same guys, or the same guys that you might have normally seen handing them out at tubes, are now doing door-to-door deliveries. So there should be, and as I understand there is, it's been a logistics success. There's about 500,000 copies going out every day.
And what are the? You mentioned the fact that you've got the 11 o'clock deadline.
Yeah.
How's that pushed the rest of the day forward, as it were? What timetable do you have? When does conference take place? How do you decide what's going in the paper every day?
So we do a Zoom call, and we do private conversations very early on, with people saying, "What do you think?" And then we have an all-together call at about 8:30. We're still figuring that out, in truth, because those conversations can be a bit messy. It's one of those situations where somebody needs to make a call early, and then tell us a direction and let's head off. And then others who are on the call feel that they need to make a contribution, and no one much wants to talk over them at this point. It's like, no, go on, do tell us what you think, kind of thing. But it just means that it's so 8:30 is when calls get made, is when decisions get made, and then we'll jiggle around afterwards a bit on the basis of what we find out or what comes into us. But it's more so than ever at the Standard. We need to get things going early, and then we can tweak as we're going along. In terms of the stuff that we might find out, I mean, the time that I make my phone calls or have my email conversations, it's between about 8:30 and 9:30, and after that I've got to read and write. And
you're not, but the physical aspect of not being in the newsroom, what challenges does that raise? Is it hard to get hold of information in the same way? Is it hard?
It's enormously difficult. It really makes the FLAC contribution important. We just don't have visibility in the way that we would do normally of obvious things. We just don't know. And I think just in terms of trying to gather things quickly, so at the moment we have got our phone. Normally in the office, you'd have the office chat, people talking, have you seen this, have you seen that? Then the email and phone calls. At the moment, we've got none of that office chat, so we're missing things where your mate next to you says, "Are you sure about that?" And you suddenly go, "No, I'm not. What do you mean?" And then you save each other from making do something stupid. So that's gone. What we have to check the whole time is a Slack rolling message. I've got 2 email addresses. There's phone calls. There's texts. There's a Zoom call in 10 minutes, and there's just and a million websites to have a look at, and TV, and it's there are so many things to juggle constantly in terms of just staying atop of operationally what I need to be aware of, so that I'm delivering for the paper, which means doing other journalistic things that I might have done, such as phoning a mate of mine who works at a bank and asking what the gossip is and what's the mood on the trading floor, for example. Well, in most cases there isn't a trading floor, but some people are still trading. Most people in banks are at home, same as everyone else. So there's all of that sort of colour that you might have wanted in terms of what's going on within a company or within the city, that we can't see now at the moment, in a way that doesn't matter, because the colour in real life is dramatic enough, far too dramatic. If assuming this goes on for as long as the best guesses suggest, there'll come a point at which the operational side of it is sorted, and then we'll be wanting to know what's on people's minds more than we do at the moment. I think. Does that begin to answer your question?
No, and it sounds as though the Standard is addressing those operational challenges over the next few weeks already, insofar as there is now changing to the staffing at the Standard, and looking at who could be put on a furlough scheme.
Well, they did that this week. Some of us have been furloughed. I'm one of them. I don't know. I wonder how long that will last. Actually, I suspect that if advertising comes back in any way at all, that they will need people to fill pages to go next to the ads. But just for now, I think what you see with the Standard is a thin paper. The owners made the decision, as I understand it. I don't think I'm giving away any state secrets here. But at the moment, the Standard's losing money because there's no advertising. So they had to cut costs. So at the moment, what you'll see, if you get it, is a somewhat thinner paper than usual. I think one day this week it was 28 pages, which is, I mean, that is thin to say the least. But it's, I think, somewhat a matter of pride and of being seen to do the right thing, that there's still a paper going out there.
Well, it's extraordinary how they have rejigged the distribution. When you see other papers like City AM have just gone online only, but at the same time, it must mean that the Standard's website is now becoming a more crucial part of the offering.
Yeah,
Anything changed on that?
Just the emphasis on it. Until relatively recently, it was still the case. All of the execs took the view, rightly, that the paper was still the main thing, and let's do some web stuff in the afternoon. That was kind of the thinking. Most of the revenues that make it sustainable as a business come from the paper being out there, and there being 900,000 copies of it in the hands of Londoners with money to spend, and therefore companies wanting to advertise, and that being a source of revenue. At the moment, I think for all papers, there is a genuine sense of purpose here, which is people want news they can trust, and that has spread onto the web. It's kind of like, okay, that's not going to make the paper because we haven't got time to do it, but can we put it on the web? So in some ways, that's maybe an opportunity for some of the people listening in here. There is the website is read by more people than pick up the paper, for sure, and we are keen for content that makes sense.
You mentioned people are after news that they can trust, but I get the sense that people are also after views that they can trust as well. In your column, do you feel the weight of the situation weighing on you when you think about what to write about and how you address it?
Hugely. I mean, you know, it worries me. My tone tends to be flippant. That's what I've spent 20 years trying to do, is try to make business use accessible and entertaining, and to not assume that the reader knows who the chief executive of Barclays is. So when I write about, say, that example, I want the chief executive of Barclays, who I know picks up the paper, it's in his car every day when he goes home. It's one of the papers I know for sure he reads. I want him to read it, and even if it's at his expense, him to think that's a smart point, and I can see why he took against me after that conversation we had earlier. But I also want anyone else who's reading it to find it accessible and to understand it, whether they work in the city or not. My conceit is that they should be able to understand it. But I do it in a flippant way, typically. At the moment, flippancy doesn't feel like the right tone to strike. Certainly, if you're going to make a joke, I think you have to read it back to yourself 10 or 20 times to be sure, because it's so easy to say the wrong thing and get the tone wrong. And I think it's almost one of those ways that maybe we can look out for each other here. It's saying to each other, when you see something, are you sure you mean that? I've actually said that to a couple of journalists myself. Are you sure you mean that? There was a journalist today who wrote, it was something about Alex Salmond and how him being let off of those assault charges. And the journalist had written, his vengeance, you've no idea how mean this guy is, was the point of it. His vengeance will be like the asteroid that struck Earth and wiped out all the dinosaurs. And I said, listen, it's not going to be like that asteroid, is it? It's just this mean guy who's vengeful, apparently. It's not like that asteroid. And I think that for all of us, we need to think about how we phrase things. But to answer your question in terms of commentary, I think people who do commentary, business commentary, all of us are worried the whole time that we might have said something stupid, especially if we're being spiky or flippant. And now, so that just applies times 10. I don't want to write something stupid, especially if it's jocular, because it's not right time for that.
Yeah. A rather apposite question is from Nick Moore, who's saying a lot of the media's focus tends to highlight winners and losers. Is that something that you're aware of?
Yeah, definitely, and absolutely, and I think going forward that would be increasingly true. Let's be optimistic and say in a month's time, the world looks like a much nicer place, and we can start being mean again to people who may not think that they deserve it. I think in the future there will be lists of winners and losers, who had a good crisis and who didn't. I think for comms people, you're trying to position yourself so you don't end up in one of the losers lists just by doing something unnecessarily daft now. On the winners front, we're looking for winners more than usual, I would say. And I think that's because it's easy at the moment just to say everything's terrible and such as a business is suffering. That's obvious that will be the case. We are very keen to hear about who's doing well and why, and it mustn't be because they are brilliantly exploiting a terrible situation. It has to be just, look, they're a good firm and they happen to have a niche here, and people are responding to that. We do want to hear those stories more than usual.
A former colleague of yours, Caroline's asking about who the winners and losers are, but we'll chat about that at the end. But I think we've got a neat segue here to go on and actually, having talked about the challenges that you face as the media, perhaps we can have a look at some of the communications challenge that you perceive people are having to cope with in the comms world. We've got a bit of feedback somewhere, Simon. Is there anything at your end that's causing feedback?
Yes, you're. I don't think it's at my end, but I can't hear you as well as I could a minute ago.
Oh, right. Well,
Michael, can I just make sure you don't have any other browsers open, because that is, sorry, quite a persistent whirring.
Well, I'll make sure I go on mute when that. Apologies if it's at my end.
No, there's nothing else open here.
Anyway, let's persevere. Simon, the new environment for the media, we talked about how you've adapted to it. How do you see the PR and the comms community adapting to this as well?
Well, I think we're all learning, aren't we? I don't know. For one thing, I will notice is PR activity has dropped off dramatically, I would say, just in terms of my inbox. There is far less of it for understandable reasons. Ironically, at a time when actually it might actually be welcomed. Things that had no chance of grabbing our attention a month ago, they might do now. So I think it's as hard for the PR industry as it is for us. What I suspect and hope is that it will get up to speed within a week or so, as we have, I think.
Now, there are some specific challenges people are faced with. One's a very practical one: is how do they get hold of you?
I think emails work, and I've always preferred them. I think that there's always been a sense from the PR industry that they are bunging out stuff on email that hardly anybody clicks at, hardly anybody looks at it. Just for now, I think that's actually the way to go. I think that might be more interesting in anything you've got to say than there would be normally. Otherwise, how do you contact people? I suspect it's something you're going to bring up in a bit. It's never been clearer the advantage of personal, relationships. So in the last couple of weeks, I have leaned very heavily on my 5 or 6 best Slack contacts, and they've leaned heavily on me in terms of, have you got a minute? Can you tell me what's going on here? What's my best bet here? How does that work? And I've leaned very heavily on them in terms of, can you help me out and explain this to me? I need your chief exec for 10 minutes right now. Can you do it? And I think that it's that kind of thing of people having put in the legwork, as it were 10 years ago. Now people are keen to help, but if you don't know somebody personally at this point, it's harder to reach them.
Just on the getting hold of people and how people should sort of send releases in, presumably the standard city email is still being policed, and even more so that's the way to send something in for general.
Absolutely, it is. No, there's a bunch of people watching it. As I say, we're trying to watch 10 other things, so it's almost like a reverse of what I would normally suggest here, which is I would say, look, don't irritate us, don't send the same thing twice, don't send it to 10 different people. Just for now, I don't think it matters if you do, because the chances of us missing something we might want are high, and I think just for now, it's no crime at all for you to send it me twice and to send it to Jim and to send it to Alex. In normal times that would be annoying. Like, you'd see it. I've already spoken to this person, or I saw that already, or Alex saw that already. Just for now, I think we'll forgive you that. So ping it about is my suggestion.
And we discussed earlier on the importance of getting the tone right from a journalistic point of view, but I should imagine it's just as important from a comms perspective as well, that people risk almost coming across as ambulance chasers in this environment.
Language is so notable. It's my job, I suppose, to partly to think about words and how they're used. So I notice those things anyway. At the moment, things that are tone deaf, they just stick out by miles. They just go clunk. And I think I think this applies to my side of the fence as much as yours. I just think you really need to read it back to yourself several times and get someone else to read it before you hit send. You need a permanent internal police system here. Are we saying something that anybody could misread? So there was a journalist standing the other day, I won't say who it was, wrote something, and it was about those recent terrible US unemployment figures. It was 3 million people in 1 week were made unemployed or applied for unemployment benefit. And the journalist described these unemployment numbers as filthy. Filthy numbers. That's like filthy unemployment numbers in the middle of a germ pandemic. Please just be careful. And you know, he took the point, but it went onto my website briefly until I saw it and said, please have a think about that. And they took the word out. But I think there's all sorts of things there where you might be, as a journalist, looking to insert drama into things by saying these numbers are filthy, where there's absolutely no need to do that. The numbers are bad; they aren't filthy. And I think, actually, in a funny kind of way, I'm reading RNSs this week. In some ways, it seems to me that Flatland is coming to its own because it's not trying to make things sound dramatic, often when they are. Sometimes trying to make things sound boring, even when actually they're firing 4,000 people or whatever. Lots of the tones of the RNSs have been spot on. You can tell. It feels to me like they're written by and overseen by more senior people than usual, because the tone's very measured, it's very calm, the sentences are short, they get to the point, they aren't filibustering, they aren't trying to hide it, they are saying sincere things the whole time, like the important thing is our people and our customers, and we're going to do what we can. And it's that kind of thing. I think it's just say what happened or what is happening, using the shortest, least dramatic words that you can. There's no need to make this sound more exciting than it is.
Sounds as though there's some lessons that ought to roll over after the crisis is over. But in terms of getting the tone right, I guess one of the other challenges is everything is being interpreted through the pandemic at the moment. Is there room for any other news, business news, beyond the impact of the virus?
Yeah, there is that much. So I think every day at the Standard we've said, can we have a non-virus story somewhere? Some sort of sense of there are places where life hasn't been completely turned upside down, and some sense of normality will return. And here's this company here that's already halfway there, really. So yeah, I think everything will still be read within the context of the virus. But to answer your question, there's definitely room for it. Again, I think to refer to the previous question, tone is really important, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, the spotlight, the media spotlight is definitely focusing on some sectors more than others, but perhaps the front and central of everything at the moment has been the Treasury and the Bank of England. Have you got any sort of observations about how they've been communicating and the challenges that they face?
I think that they've done a fantastic job. And I think it's one of those situations where I think as Brits we love to assume that we're terrible at everything, and that this is a chaotic country and we can't do anything. And so I think I might be borrowing a line from myself here. I think I wrote the other day. We like to think that, oh, we tried to build a bridge over a pond, you know, us Brits, it would fall over. You know, we're that hopeless, aren't we? But we're not. And when it comes to big institutions, our biggest institutions, the Bank of England and the Treasury are fantastic. There's loads of really smart people in there who very quickly figured out what to do and did it. I mean, within days. It's impressive, actually. And I guess it's hard to think of Treasury people as key workers, but I think that they were. Lots of really clever people who could be making much more money elsewhere, pulled it together and persuaded the government. I think, I'm sure the government was halfway there. Here's what you've got to do, and here's how we do it, and here's the logistics of it. So I think the Bank and the Treasury, I've always been sort of impressed with how they operate. I think that's even more clear now that they are among the best run British big institutions. I think they're smart, and I think that's part of the reason why I think that we'll be okay. It's not true in other countries. That those institutions are so solid. In terms of communication, I think, well, I'm sure that what they are doing is relying on people that they already know, that they can trust to interpret what they're doing correctly. I think what would be really good is if the bank and the treasury did a better job of explaining how money works to people out there, to political reporters, and to people just watching the news. So, you know, one of the questions that people keep bringing up is, where is this money going to come from? Well, the answer is it's going to come from us, and we'll pay it back really slowly over 100 years. But it actually isn't a problem. They can do it, and I think that the bank and the treasury could do a better job of explaining that basic thing. So the worry in a lot of people's mind must be is, how can you just invent money out of thin air and won't it end in disaster? Well, it's the least of our worries. It'll be fine, but I think that they could talk us through it a bit more gently than they perhaps are doing.
So the gilt markets are a little bit more than just getting our grandchildren to pay for it. Can we look at some of the winners and losers? For readers of Tomorrow's Business, the titles of the last two issues have given some sort of indication of who I think you might be flagging up as winners and losers at the moment.
Yeah, well, banks, they do themselves no favours, do they? They really don't. And talking to them over the last couple of weeks, it's extraordinary. And the corporate commerce people at banks are always really smart, because they have to be, because they have to understand how these very complicated institutions work. But they don't. I think they spend too much time doing that and not enough time looking at the outside world or looking at how they appear. And banks generally have a bad reputation. I hope they pull it round. I hope they figure out that it's not just what they do, it's how they appear to be doing it. It's so important. And it was Tuesday, wasn't it? Tuesday night, where the Bank of England finally did what was obvious to observers that they were going to do. And they were waiting for banks to do the right thing themselves and say, we're not going to pay out dividends this year, and there won't be any bonuses for our executives this year. There won't be. And because they didn't, and the banks were saying to the Bank of England, look, we've actually got loads of capital here, and we want to pay a dividend. We want to look like we're still functioning. It was so cloth-eared to reality. I mean, you can imagine that. When do bank dividends ever make the news at 10? Well, this week they were going to, especially if they paid it. Barclays still paid out £1 billion this morning, which was their intention. They'd have been on the news in a bad way. It's hard from the outside to understand why they didn't get that.
And presumably, then that's going to colour the way that people look at the way that banks treat the economy over and businesses, and particularly small businesses, over the next weeks and months.
Over the next weeks and months, definitely it will. What's interesting to me is how long people's memories last. So let's go forward to 2025, and we're in the middle of another mini boom of some sorts, and bank bonuses are up, and the chief executive just got £3 million in LTIPs because he's done so well. Is there still going to be that sense of, we remember what you were like before, and that's not on? Or are we going to do what we normally do, which is to say, oh, well, you know, stuff. People in the city make a lot of money, so what? I don't know what the answer is. For the next few weeks and months, it's going to be absolutely front of mind what people did and what people said. Mike Ashley is going to find out, I should think, how long that sense of public anger lasts. I don't know.
What did you make of the Mike Ashley apology?
Extraordinary. I mean, I actually I don't know. He goes through PR people like, you know, knives through butter. He doesn't care for them, and mostly over the course of his career, because he doesn't particularly care about his public perception, it seems to me. It just hasn't mattered. So I'm sure he's had maybe 20 different senior PR people at various steps along his journey saying, look, this is going to have a longer term impact than you realize. You can't just go around jokingly making jokes about 0 hours contracts and making jokes about your favorite pastime being drinking 12 pints of lager and then vomiting into pub fireplaces and all of that stuff. Until now, I guess it all seemed like a joke to him, because his business just rolls on and he's the last retailer standing and he's got 2 billion quid, so why should he care? Suddenly, I think last week he was looking at the possible end of his whole business. I saw there was a very clever tweet from a very clever PR woman a while ago. She said that he'd done a reverse Gerald Ratner. So Gerald Ratner, you remember, his business went bust after he said that his products were all crap. What Mike Ashley did was the opposite. He tried to insist that his products are so important, that they're so brilliant, that he must be allowed to keep selling them, despite the government order for non-essential shops to shut up and go home. And I think that apology, I think a PR person got hold of him and said, you're just going to have to say sorry in the most, sincere way possible. I'm curious as to whether he actually means it. Does he know how badly he got it wrong, or has he just been persuaded that he really needed to say, I'm sorry, I got this really badly wrong? It'd be really interesting to know what he thinks. And there will be books written about this, of course, and I'd like to see a whole chapter on Inside Sports Direct and the Mike Ashley bit where he suddenly went, okay, we need to say we have got this horribly wrong, and all of our resources are available to the NHS, which I think it was in his statement. It's one of the most extraordinary RNSs I've ever read.
Well, it would be interesting to see how that one evolves and whether there is signs that he is beginning to listen and act on advice. So, look on the flip side, perhaps examples where people are getting it right, where people are helping your trade, where people are making a difference.
Well, in the obvious example is the supermarkets. I think that they've always understood, and prior to the crisis, there have always been discussions in relation to Brexit and previous big events of the government being clued up enough to say to the big supermarkets, listen, if this disaster happens, can you keep us fed? And the supermarkets saying, yeah, we've got it. We know how to manage this. And it seems to me very clear that all of that sort of prep for stuff, and actually maybe the prep for Brexit was key in this. My learned colleague, I should say, Tony Hilton, wrote this the other day, that civil servants who were mostly opposed to Brexit, and senior business people who were mostly opposed to it as well, they put in so much prep for how they cope with the Brexit disaster that when this happened, they had a plan on the shelf. Here's what we did. And I think in terms of who's handling it well, at the moment, I would say it is supermarkets, because they did things that now seem obvious. They did them very quickly, like key workers can come in between these times. Vulnerable old people, well, the shop's yours for an hour every morning. Just those things that, again, now seem part of the national fabric, but they did it quickly before anyone asked them. And it comes across well, I think.
Simon, I think we ought to start looking to wrap up. We've got a few questions that have come in on the right. I've just got a couple of quick ones, more focused about the standard. Presumably now, actually, one of the with the challenges of your deadlines and things, that you need to, it helps if people flag things the day before. Would you say that is good time to?
Absolutely.
And it is now sort of 3 o'clock in the afternoon the day before.
The standard for sure, absolutely. And I think that it's funny, the conversation I've had this week where PR people have told me things that normally they wouldn't dare because they potentially be in trouble, but they just trusted me enough that I wouldn't do anything with it. Like, look, this is coming out tomorrow. Can we help you prep for it? The kind of thing that would normally be an announceable event, an RNS only, and nobody better could speak of it until that thing comes out. There's that kind of thing. I think prep the day before is really helpful, not least because journalists are always looking for something to say to their editors, and if an announcement comes out and the hack is already on top of it, it does us a huge favor. So yeah, I think preps the day before is really helpful. One other thought that I've got in terms of stuff that we're looking for, things that require face-to-face, normally require face-to-face meetings, such as a profile piece. The Evening Standard does an entrepreneurs piece every week. That's normally one of us goes out and talks to somebody who's running this exciting young tech firm, typically. At the moment, we obviously can't do those meetings, but we've still got to fill the space. So I think that interesting business people who are available for interview, that might make a profile piece or might make one of those shorter pieces that all papers do of clever tech company in the news. I think that the appetite for those, it's much harder for us to fill those slots than normal, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. But I get the message there, and actually it answers one of the questions that's just come in. So there is still appetite and opportunity for some sort of feature, for business features and profiles.
Absolutely, and there's so much harder. Absolutely, there is, and there's so much harder for us to pull together than normal, because our visibility is less, and we're not seeing other papers as much as we you do normally, and we're not so worried about it. So normally, if something has appeared somewhere else, unless the news is so big, we're all going to cover it. If it's a little-ish thing, oh well, it was in the FT last week. Well, that's it. We're not going to do it. At the moment, we may not have seen that it was in the FT last week, and presently we don't care as much. It's not. This isn't the time for us to be all haughty about, well, you didn't come to us first, so we're not going to speak to you. We may well do, actually.
Yeah, and in terms of the focus of the business section at the Standard, yes, Jim's trying to give as good a coverage on a day-to-day basis. But overall, do you know where he's wanting to go in the next couple of weeks, in the sort of the tone, the focus, things he's going to try and sew in?
He's looking for upbeat news. He's looking for examples of things working. So the comment piece he did the other day was the effect of the financial markets and the city have all functioned exactly like you hoped that they would. He said no one's noticed, no one's written about it, but companies are raising money, the same as usual, and all of those things are functioning. It's almost like any sign that normal life continues is good news, and we would like to hear some good news on that score. Just while I think of it, there was something that made the paper the other day that normally I would have ignored, but it was a PR person who knows me, and they said, have you seen that it was a pub company, City Pub Company, London Pub Company, and one of those. It's raised, even though all of its pubs are shut, it managed to raise, I don't know, 10 million quid in the debt markets, and the shares went up. And normally that would be the sort of thing, you know, why are you giving me that plug for your client? It was one of those days where everything was down. You know, the stock market was falling off a cliff, it was down however many points it was. Actually, here's a bit of good news that suggests there's all people are already thinking about the future. And even though this company, all of its pubs are shut, they managed to raise some money and the stock went up. Investors took a positive view of it. And it was the sort of thing, oh, we ran it, you know, it got a big chunk in the stock market report. So there's things like that we normally might not care for you to tell us, and at the moment, tell us.
Olivia, are there any specific questions that have come in over the last half hour that you think we need to address?
Yes, I'm just going to ask a few. How will the pandemic impact the media landscape?
I don't know, but I don't know. My guess is that it will. I think this is true of other industries as well. It will just exacerbate the trends you've already seen. So there will be a move to more online, more stuff like this. more video content, more podcasts, and fewer papers. I mean, our lives are increasingly online, aren't they? So I think that as someone who loves newspapers and who spent the last 10 years or whatever just hoping they continue and thinking they're important and thinking that it's vitally important that these things are written down on a bit of paper that you can't erase. Well, you know, stuff lives on the web too, is the truth. I think it's going to be ever more this kind of stuff.
Do you think there'll be more video content that Evening Standard roll out?
Yeah, again, we've been trying to do it for years. We've been nibbling at that, but we're just not very good at it. I'm not very good at it, and it's a distraction from the paper, or has been until now. Going forward, I think we're going to have a lot more of that, which means that there's going to be scope for business people who can talk well to make a name for themselves.
Brilliant. I've just got a question from Ben. How do you see fintech companies communicating during the pandemic compared to banks?
They're better at it, they're starting with a clean sheet, aren't they? They're better at it. What they don't appreciate, I think, and this is true, pandemic or no, is that there are a small number of tech reporters who absolutely understand this field very well, and then there's the rest of us. And most of the time, when you're looking at a tech release or responding to a tech-related email, I always have to say, look, you're just going to have to start at the beginning. It kind of sounds interesting, but I don't really know what this company does. And then the answer is always this jargon-filled mess. You're like, I don't know what any of that means. And I think that tech is maybe the solution to all sorts of things and part of the way out of this. But you know, when you're talking about your client, start right at the beginning. Don't assume that we know what they do or how they do it.
Great. Appreciate that Standard wants to steer away from negativity, but they have a job story coming up which is expected to show drop in employment in London. Would that still be of interest?
Sorry, I missed the start of that question.
Just that she said that she appreciates that the Evening Standard wants to steer away from negativity. But would that story she's highlighted still be of interest?
Sorry, I can't see where I'm looking here.
Do you want me to read it out again?
Yeah, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't see that question.
Don't worry, it's just a bit further on. So she says she appreciates that the Evening Standard wants to steer away from negativity, but she has a job story coming up which is expected to show drop in employment in London. Would that story still be of interest?
Yeah, it will be for sure. Detail, I would suggest, and that would be good. Can she break it down by borough? Could we do a map of London that shows what's happened in each place? And can she do that map for us? That would be great.
Brilliant. I think we've probably got time for one more question. Just looking through.
There was one point we were going to talk about, which we alluded to, but I wonder whether it's worth going back to, is the personal touch. I know me and Michael were talking about it the other day. I'm able to function from home purely because I spent 20 years out and about meeting people. There's enough numbers in my phone for people who will take my call that I have enough expertise, that I need with the little box next to me. I really feel sorry for people younger than me who haven't got that backlog of contacts, because it must be very difficult for them. But I think one of the things that's going to come out of this is that realization that personal communications are so important. You can. I think Michael said the other day, if you put the miles in, over the last 20 years, now you can run on empty for a bit, or something to that effect. So we are not making any new contacts now, but we're relying on our old friends in each direction, I think. And I think for young hacks and young flacks who don't like getting out of the office and think they can do everything via email, you can't. It's the relationships that really work in these circumstances. The people that I trust them and like them, and likewise. And we've spoken a million times over the years, and we have lunch twice a year just to remind each other that we like each other. And those things are just a key in a circumstance like this.
Olivia, I think we've done most of the questions.
Yeah.
I'm just going to round off, Simon, perhaps looking at a slightly more positive aspect. And yes, we're going to emerge from this crisis in due course, but at the present, there is a role for comms. This is not an existential crisis, the threat that some sectors in the economy are facing. And if we look at the update from WPP the other day, they said actually that their corporate communications businesses were active and doing a valuable job for clients. Presumably from your side of things, you're seeing that as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think a very senior PR person said to me the other day, he was amazed that he was talking about the change of tone. There's a well-known City commentator who is somewhat rude, I would say, to everybody, and particularly to PR people. I've seen it; it's shocking how rude he is, even though he relies on them completely. And this PR person said, "I can't believe it. He asked me how I was, and he seemed to mean it." I think that there's an understanding that we do need each other, and for companies, I think it's never been more clear to them that they need to think and they need to rely on experts, need to take advice from experts before they say whatever they were going to say to the wider world. I think that the PR industry will endure, and it's often seen as something akin to marketing, isn't it, or advertising? Or it's free. It's advertising, but it's free, or it's marketing, but it's not really sexy, is it? And marketing and advertising can forget about it for now. In terms of communications, PR's where it's at, and I think that senior business people are relying even more than they did do on really bright flags, stopping them from doing something stupid. And then I think just at a lower level operationally, what you guys are sending out, it will never be of more significance than it is now. I mean, 20 years time, when you're doing something else and you're sending out, trying to get some publicity for some campaign to save hedgehogs or something, you'll look back on this and think, well, what we were doing then actually made a difference. It really mattered, and we were able to persuade a company to do the right thing and save itself from itself. And I'm not going to say that you're going to miss it, but I think it's really important what you do.
Brilliant. Well, Simon, thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for everybody on the right for joining us this morning. I apologise if the sound has been less than optimal, but if you really did struggle to hear it, we're going to have a go at tidying it up, and we will send you a link to the video again. But anyway, I hope everyone is keeping safe and sound, and if there are any issues about the Wroxhill service and whether we can help you in the meantime, then please let us know. But thank you once again, Simon, and looking forward to discussing tomorrow's business with you again on Monday.
Very good. Thanks all. Have a good weekend.
Goodbye all.